Hi, guys, and welcome to Athlete Insight. Today's interview is going to be with Dr. Dom Laušić. So, Dr. Dom was born in Zagreb in Croatia, and he moved to the United States at an early age. Dr. Dom has gotten his PhD in sports psychology at the Florida State University. His work has been published in many scientific and coaching publications, and he's spoken at big international and national level conferences. So, Dr. Dom has an educational background in tennis, and with this educational background, he's been a national tester for the Professional Tennis Registry. He is a clinician, and he's spoken at many important symposiums. So Dr. Dom has worked with athletes on many levels, ranging from junior to college to Olympic and even professional athletes. And he's worked with many D1 teams. So Dr. Dom has basically taken his passion of tennis and he's made it into a career which he truly loves. And that's why I'm very excited to show you guys my interview with him. So without further ado, here's the interview. So I know you earned a PhD in sports psychology and that's your career, right? So in the first place, what drove you to pursue sports psychology?
Well, I was actually doing tennis coaching for many years, and as I traveled and worked with the players and parents and coaches, I realized how little information basically they're given about mental side of sport. So that was especially evident to go to tournaments once you're working with basically players that are ranked that have a national rankings that are competing internationally. And I was very kind of negatively surprised, given of the impact of the mental side on the performance, how very few of them invested in that side of the sport. So, as there are many coaches, but there's not that many sports psychologists working in tennis. There are some that have done really good groundwork for us to follow. But that was basically the main motivation, try to fill that gap.
Right. Sounds really interesting. And so, can you basically explain the role of a sports psychologist and how they contribute to the process of injured athletes? So, like how they help injured athletes recover?
Well, there's one thing that I will need to distinguish. So when it comes to just the term sports psychologist, so because of the organizations that we belong in and because of our training, so in the United States, only if we actually have the clinical training, we can call ourselves sports psychologists. Everywhere else in the world, if you get a PhD in the sports psychologist or specialization in the sports psychology, then you would call yourself sports psychology or sports psychologist. But here in the United States, so there's some legal issues that would prevent us from being called a sports psychologist. So therefore, we call mental performance consultants. So that is the sort of the official term that and the position of our sort of like a governing body in the United States, which is basically ASP. So that sort of gathers all the practitioners of applied sports psychology in the United States.
Yeah.
And so can you repeat the question one more time?
Sure. So, I was basically saying, what's the
Oh, the
role of a
role,
sports
the role.
psychologist? Yeah.
What is the role? What is the role? Basically, the role of somebody that works in a field of mental performance is to help the athletes, obviously, to get the performance on a level that would allow them to perform at their peak. So we address the issues such as motivation, stress management, focus and attention practices like and sort of tools such as self-talk, body language, which else I'm forgetting? Let's see, visualization, teamwork and cohesion, so mistake management. So those would be some of the core issues that sports psychologists would help athletes to gain confidence, to sort of be able to manage the ups and downs of competition, manage stress, and that's sort of our description in a nutshell.
Yeah. So, I know you work with many athletes, especially many tennis players, and a lot of them have had injuries. You come across people with injuries, I'm sure. So, from what you've seen, how do these injuries normally impact their mental state?
Quite negatively, to be honest, Adi. And it's and I'm not going to go into detail, but every athlete that suffers injury, there's 5 stages that they basically go through. And whether that's denial, whether that's the acceptance, it depends on how far removed they are from injury. Is the athlete healing? But that's a big confidence blow. And that's one of the sort of like a sub areas of our expertise where we're helping athletes to go through these difficult times, how to handle the adversity, and basically overcome this, because this is an opportunity to grow in different areas. So oftentimes as athletes are traveling, getting better, working on their skills, better in their performance, a lot of things can be neglected. So for example, they may not be able to address technical issues. They may not be able to educate themselves in another area, and some of them is mental toughness. So that will be a good opportunity to kind of focus on some of the areas that they typically don't have time to do if they're traveling pretty much nonstop. And in tennis, as we all know, that schedule is pretty much year round. You don't have really seasons, and there's very little time to do something else. And also on a physical side, it helps to strengthen the areas that you did not have time to address while you were practicing or traveling or playing tournaments.
Yeah. So kind of going off of the previous question, what are some common challenges that tennis players face after sustaining an injury?
Quite a bit of loss of confidence. It also could be sort of like a syndrome of why did this happen to me? And that they oftentimes are quite they're are resilient. So yeah, the loss of confidence in their abilities, and taking time, because once the player heals, the performance is not going to be on the same level as it were when the player got injured, when the athlete got injured, and so it will take some time to basically get performance level to the same level before the injury, and that's time can be impacted by frustration and impatience, and so it takes quite a resilient athlete that can go over that.
Yeah. So do you have any specific strategies or, any specific things that these injured athletes can do to manage these challenges?
For sure, goal setting would be a great exercise. So just how to improve some of the areas where the time schedule could not actually evolve or improve. So understanding what is basically achievable, and there's an acronym that most of the athletes are familiar with. It's called a SMARTER principle. And so when you're setting the goals, and even for strengthening the areas, because what happens when one gets injured, whether it's a trauma, whether it's a tear of a tendon, whatever it is, athletes oftentimes sort of back off from stressing this area. And of course, when you get injured, you don't want to get re-injured. But there's a reason why the area where the injury happened, got affected. So how are you going to address this? That you have to, with the expert's opinion, work that area physically. And but that's also a time to grow in areas, as I mentioned, mental toughness. There's a famous example of an athlete. This was in, I believe, when did it happen? I think it was 1980, excuse me, 88 or 89, when this player got injured. And so it was basically a car accident. And both his knees were crushed. He just broke in top 10 in the world. His name is Thomas Muster, born in Austria, representing Austria. And playing all these tournaments, one of the rising stars. And this injury happened, after which the doctor told him he may never be able to walk normally again. So I'd be interested to see, and I wish at some point the book comes out, how he handled the adversity. But the rehabilitation started the day after the surgery, and there's a well-documented material. You have some footage on YouTube where he started exercising immediately after doctor cleared him. Hey, you can work it out. And he was not just working on the affected area, but let's say abs, the shoulders. We can see him in the gym working out. And then a few weeks later, he was actually captured on a photo, or I think there's even a video that shows him. He's in a chair, specially designed chair. The leg, the worst affected leg was in a cast still, and he's on the ball machine, hitting against the ball machine. So 9 months later, he started competing again, and for years later, 5 or 6 years later, he won his first Grand Slam. And I believe the following year he became number one in the world. And in the process, he set a record of 12 professional tournaments won in 1 year, the record which has not been surpassed since. Roger Federer came close. I'm not sure what was the year, but that's quite a remarkable bounce back. And he cites actually that experience as something that helped him to become number one. He said, I could have been dead, or I could never become number one because of that incident or accident. So, yes, I'm sure that he had some goals, that he had a big belief, and perhaps even some visualization exercises that took place as he was able to learn, as we all know that what happens during the visualization process can strengthen some of the paths and can be successfully used to alter technique, strengthen the body, but just in average, just in general, could help somebody to sort of get better at what they do, because it's quite powerful mental performance technique.
Yeah. So also going off of the previous question I just asked, so how can these players approach setting realistic goals? Like maybe not having completely out of reach goals or impossible goals. How can they like stay setting a realistic goal?
Well, this is where the coaches really need to help them to stay grounded. And it's fine for some of the goals to sort of represent dreams, but when the goals are realistic, so they have to be kind of grounded in what's possible. And this is what the coach can be very, very helpful, because he knows what the athletes are capable of, and it will be important to set up goals that depend just on the individual, not on somebody else, as most of the athletes do. So most of their goals revolve around rankings, around wins, won tournaments, and so on and so forth. But they rarely set goals around fitness, which is what they're completely in control of. So when one sets the goals, several principles need to be followed. One is specificity. So S in the acronym SMARTER. So specificity, how specific is the goal? Do we know exactly, once the goal is stated, what needs to be done? So this next letter, which is M, measurable. How can we sort of have an idea what are we improving? And everything that can be measured can be improved. So A would stand for appropriate. How appropriate is the goal? So for tennis player, does it make sense to set a goal of running a half marathon in less than 2 hours? No, it's not really the best thing for somebody who engages in a sport that requires quite a bit of explosiveness to do something that requires a lot of endurance. And then the next principle that has to be followed is, let me see, so we're on letter R. So that will be realistic. T would stand for time. So every goal should have the timeline. And then the goal set, you have to be able to motivate the athlete. And the last one, R, stands for recorded down the goal somewhere. Then we can further work on the goals and divide them on between short-term goals. So let's say for somebody your age, short-term goal could be anything, from a 1 week to maybe a month or maybe 2 months. Then we have the second group of goals that would be intermediate goals. So anything from, let's say, month or 2 months to perhaps 1 year. And then we have a long-term goal. So let's say 1 year and beyond. For professional, short-term goal could be 3 months, because their room for improvement is so small. Like all they're trying to do is to maybe get better, 1%. And how does that happen? It takes a lot of time. That's why they cannot set a goal for themselves. Let's say, okay, I want to run this distance, this amount of time, or I want to bench press this much. So for something to be sort of tangible, visible, bigger change needs to happen. And for that, you need to have more time. And then finally, you have long-term goals that for professional athletes could be, let's say, 5 years or 10 years. What is the legacy? Can I win a Grand Slam? Can I win just a professional tournament? Can I be ranked in top 100? Can I play collegiate tennis? Can I play let's say on a championship winning team, let's say my senior year, something like that. And then also we have another division of goals, which would be based on thank you. Lost my train of thought. So this would be performance oriented goals, and then we also have outcome related goals. So performance goals are ones that athletes have 100% control of, and outcome goals are goals such as rankings, such as tournament prize money, winning certain tournaments, trophies, UTR, as you're familiar with, and those would be the outcome type goals. And performance type would be, okay, how many push-ups can I do? Let's say, can I do in about a month time, a mile under, let's say, 5.5 minutes? Can I, do X number of squats, every other morning, that sort of stuff.
Yeah. So, like you just mentioned, the recovery process isn't something easy. It's pretty hard on many athletes, many tennis players. So, how can these injured tennis players, how can they stay motivated and like focused and have a positive mindset while going through this recovery process?
One of the helpful exercises is actually reading biographies, especially the athletes that have gone through obviously ups and downs and injuries, very, very difficult time. So they're almost like vicarious experiences. Somebody else lives through it, and you try to kind of get hope. Perhaps I can get through it. Perhaps in this period I can strengthen something that I've been, I had as a weakness, just to keep them motivated. And definitely, first couple of injuries can be most devastating because the players are very, very young athletes, are very kind of unfamiliar with it. But it's a common state, and especially longer as somebody career is, more likelihood of them getting injured, unless they really, really spend time and work on injury prevention. And so perhaps they can outline plan with a specialist. Maybe it's going to be a coach, and working together with, let's say, fitness and conditioning specialist and physio, where they can just make sure that they're going to be stretching exercises, they're going to be strengthening exercises both before the matches, after the matches, what they can get better at. And yes, how can this time be utilized? So as you're in high school, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so in the summer you get injured, and well, how can I use this time to maybe catch up on a reading, or maybe get ahead of the reading that I need to do, or maybe you have let's say maybe math is not your favorite subject. Okay, how can I get some tutoring during this time to sort of get ahead, right? So
Yeah.
the idea would be, okay, I have this free time, right? What can I do with it? How can I utilize it in a smart way? So I hope that gives you, some strategies, so
It
what
does.
to do during this time. There's actually some good resources out there. So where folks that were specializing in the area of sports psychology wrote a book on psychology of sport injury. So there are resources out there. So that would be helpful to read for the coaches and for the young athletes as well, to understand the process. And I'm sure some of these resources are offering. It's not sort of the area where I specialize, but I've dealt with the players that have had almost like career-threatening injury. And during this time, we just take a look at a whole career. What have you been doing in the last couple of years? What can be changed? What can get better? What are some of the things that you can keep? Just almost like remove yourself a little bit from the current situation and take your career as a whole, to set some new goals, to set some new challenges, to make maybe the process of training and competing and traveling a little bit better. And this is exactly what experience was with this athlete that thought, okay, I have a wrist surgery. She was a tennis player, and it was a career-threatening injury. And she finally was able to get in top 20 in the world in doubles. But during this process, we really took a kind of closer look. What is her equipment? What is her training regimen? And when it comes to equipment, she was actually playing with the strings and with the rackets that were very, very, how would I say, almost like harmed the wrist, right? And because the racket was very, very stiff, so we took all the time that we had solutions involving strings, where she would play with with a very, very brittle strings, very, very stiff polyester strings, and over time we took some other solutions. So natural gut was the key, and that's what she started using, and was really amazed how what a control it gave her, the power, and just was able to do quite well with it. Yes, it's a little bit more expensive, like everything else. It's an investment in the career. And then we also took a look at the rackets, and we changed the racket. They were a little bit softer, but it still gave her everything that she needed from it, and that she stayed pretty much healthy in that area throughout the rest of her career.
All right.
That's psychology of injury. Yes.
Yeah.
Psychology of injury, psychology of sports injury. It's an area that is worth looking at. So for coaches, athletes, and specialists in my area.
Yeah. So I know you mentioned before that for the first injury, especially, it can be really devastating for athletes and it kind of leaves them scared, in fact. And they become paranoid after recovering. So how can they overcome this fear of re-injury after fully recovering?
Strengthening the area. So if you know that it's you have to do something that's going to give you confidence that you minimize the probability of it happening. So what's going to happen if you go to a gym and you really, really strengthen the muscles? Well, you have more protection for this area, right? Making sure that you don't overtrain, making sure that you take a look, okay, this injury happened. Why did it happen? Maybe I was not strong in this area. Maybe I just completely neglected it. Maybe I was not stretching area enough. Perhaps I played too much. I trained too much. So what is the ideal number of hours? There's a reason why when you go to college, you're limited only to 20 hours of practice and match play. So there's always you got to take a look at antecedents. So what preceded to this injury, and then you work the strategies. How can I remove the probability of happening? So if I go to a gym after the injury and really work this area, strengthening, making sure that I do everything that's in my power, there's going to be a certain amount of confidence that will not happen again. And there's a reason why Yannick Sinner is wearing these ankle braces for every match that you see him. He's not gonna forget to put him on, right? And because there's probably an incident that happened before that he might have learned the hard way, and it might be a good thing that it happened. When an athlete is young, learns about the professionalism, because really managing injuries and managing one fitness level is and flexibility and strength is really about elevating one's professionalism. So it could be a good thing. So if you see it in a positive light, okay, injury happened. This is how I'm going to deal with this. I'm going to get better how I manage my body, how I manage my workouts, and good things can happen. So rather than see it, it's all doom and gloom, I see it as a very, very negative, right? How to spin it the other way and see that as a learning experience, get something out of that process. And if you do get injured, then what can happen is what can I do? How can I get better even if the injury happens? Through all this, whether it's 3 months, whether it's 6 months, that I use that as a learning process for the next injury. Because next injury, I know exactly what I need to do. All right, I'm going to spend this much time goal setting. I'm going to take a look at what happened before that. Maybe I just overdid maybe a match play. All right, I got to be a little more careful and pay attention to more where we're at.
Right. So I know having a good support system is very important for his injured athletes, especially. So how can friends or family or coaches help them? How can they support them?
How can I support them? There's got to be positive outlook, and kind of reiterate the message that I mentioned to you, right? How can this experience be seen in a positive light? What can be learned from it? be supportive over there, and just offer encouragement, and through the whole process, and like I mentioned, you want to stay positive in the surrounding, and kind of understand that that's also part of being an athlete. Because parents often get, especially if you're in a recruiting process, and okay, the injury happens, and okay, what to do now? Maybe some prospects of playing for the school that you wanted to go to, and team that you wanted to play for may not be there. Well, and if you have to find a different school, that you always try to see some kind of a positive situation out of it. And as I've been around athletes, this is what most of them, the successful ones, they always try to get something out of it that's positive. And the parents need to come to play the same role.
Yeah. So I know you already talked about it a bit before with someone you trained with, but can you share any stories where some psychological strategies helped a player recover?
Correct. Visualization was one. And goal setting isn't the talk a little bit more about, so visualization would be another exercise that I would, because let's be frank, most of the players invest very, very little into visualization. More professional the athlete is, more time they put into that and building confidence. These being almost like the most important part from motivation and goal setting. These would be, I would say, the most important tools for a professional athlete or Olympic level athlete. And because, a lot of them speak about that. So the strategy for them, let's say during injury time, and I'll tell you what a visualization does. So we know from studies that when one engages in the process of visualization, you basically are sending the electric impulses that go from your brain through your spine, and they go through the limbs, right? So let's say if you're visualizing forehand, you're gonna activate the same muscles that would participate in the forehand swing. So if you move the muscles, there's way more activation than just simply during visualization. In visualization, let's say you would just put a few microvolts of current right through these muscles, and that's not enough to move, not even to lift the arm, but nonetheless the muscles are activated, right? And if you put I'm not sure how many hundreds of microvolts you need, basically to lift the arm and to go through the whole movement. But basically what happens is, as you visualize, and you visualize, let's say 50 times, that current is going to get past them, these muscles 50 times. So what happens during that time, the sheath that goes across, around these neurons called myelin is being formulated every time, is being built. So every time that you practice something, whether it's shadow swinging, whether it's you go on the court, whether you're in a ball machine, whether you're playing the match, every time you do the swing in a certain way, that myelination process, that sort of insulating process is taking place, and that path is getting stronger and stronger. So mental strategy during the time of injury would be visualize, visualize, visualize. So you don't lose that time. You don't do any practice at all. So that would be the most devastating time. So you can spend the time. Okay, how about if I visualize? Let's say my backhand underspin approach is very, very weak shot, and I want to one day play on the grass, right? And let's say I'm going to go to grass court nationals. That's my goal, and that I can just visualize every day. Let's say 50 times, close my eyes, right? And I'm going to visualize basically that approach. Coming to the net, maybe followed by volley, maybe followed by overhead. Or maybe I'm going to play the point that's going to include that shot, and that would be maybe the final stage of visualization. But the first step would be, okay, can I visualize simple things quite well? For example, like colors, like shapes, like 3D objects, and then more complex objects. And then if I can do that well, let me see if I can visualize, members of family. Can I picture moving objects? Can I visualize something that I'm familiar with, but it's more complex than the other thing that I mentioned earlier? And then you would actually start visualizing maybe yourself playing tennis and just practice hitting the balls back and forth. Maybe you visualize yourself at a certain parts of the court. Maybe it's going to be the baseline. Maybe it's going to be the net. Maybe it's going to be the midcourt. Maybe it's just going to be mini tennis. And then after that, you would start maybe doing some drills, maybe sequence of shots during visualization. And after you're done doing that, let's find yourself playing points. Once you become good at that, how can I myself into playing? Let's say how can I manipulate that image or vision? Can I see myself playing in Arthur Ashe Stadium? And this is exactly what Bianca Andreescu mentioned. So U.S. Open champion 2019, because we just played finals of the grassroots tournament last weekend, and she was quoted that she would visualize pretty much every single day. And when they asked her, well, visualizing at the U.S. Open, what did you do? Well, this was not the first time that I quote, this was not the first time I played Serena Williams. This was not the first time that I played in my mind Serena on Arthur Ashe Stadium. I've done it many, many, many times. So that would be one of the strategies, how to stay engaged with the sport.
All right. So I was just saying that about sums up my questions for today. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to, sit here, have an interview. And this will probably not only help me, but many other injured athletes in the future who are injured and they need this for their recovery, their mentality. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Have a great day.